I'm happy to greet you from the United Nations in Geneva. And I'm very happy to have this opportunity to share with you some of the findings of our Digital Economy Report 2021, which was launched only about 3 weeks ago. And it discusses the connection between cross-border data flows and development. And I could pick up from the previous speaker some of the words in English about data, about COVID, about digitalization, and I think this is exactly what we're talking about here. I'm having a bit of problems with uploading the slides, so I'm going to ask the organizers to run them for me. So go to the next slide, please. Can turn to the next slide. Thank you. So data flows today are growing like never before. In fact, we see that over the past few years, it has increased tremendously. So internet traffic in 2022 is expected to be more than all the internet traffic leading up to 2016. And we see that these data flows, they are running especially through two routes between North America and Europe and between North America and Asia, and especially China. At the same time, we are seeing that there are huge divides in terms of the ability to take advantage of this data around the world. If we just look at the people using the internet, we can see that in the rich countries, almost 9 out of 10 people are users of the internet, whereas in the poorest countries, only 1 in 5 are using the internet. And this, of course, creates big challenges from a policy-making perspective. And we are only in the beginning of this. We saw during the COVID pandemic that data flows surged drastically as a result of more people turning to digital solutions. And we also expect that 5G rollout and the increased use of the Internet of Things will also add to more data and data flows. As a result, data are today an extremely important both economic and strategic resource. Next slide, please. Now, we have a lot to talk today about data and data value. The problem is that data in themselves, they do not generate any value for anyone. In order to generate value, either private value in terms of profits or social value for society as a whole, you need to transform the data into what we call digital intelligence. And that once you have the digital intelligence, that can be monetized in various ways. For instance, by selling targeted online advertising, which is the prime revenue source of companies like Google and Facebook. Next slide, please. The ability and the capacity to do this transformation of data into digital intelligence varies a lot around the world. And there are two countries that stand out, especially the United States and China. These two economies, they account for half of the world's hyperscale data centers. They show the highest rates of 5G adoption in the world. They account for 94% of all funding of artificial intelligence startups. And they also account for 90% of the market capitalization of the world's largest digital platforms. And these digital platforms are expanding very much into all stages of the global data value chain, not in terms of collecting data only, but also in terms of transmitting the data, storing the data, processing the data, and using the data. Next slide, please. These big platforms are today very well-known brands. And as you can see here, the biggest of the world are Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook, Alphabet, Tencent, and Alibaba. All these 7 are from the US and China. You can also see from this map here that Europe is a relatively small player when it comes to the platform economy. It's become very important in terms of regulating data and data flows, but the biggest players in Europe are basically SAP and Spotify, but from a global perspective, they account for a relatively small share. Next slide, please. Well, what should we then do about data, and how do we make sure that data bring development gains? It's challenging, and partly the reason for this is that data are so complex. They are multidimensional. They are different from traditional goods and services. They have both an economic dimension and a non-economic dimension. In terms of economic dimension, they can generate private value. They can also generate social value, helping us to deal with various development challenges such as climate change, health crises, and so on. The non-economic dimension of data is related to privacy, other human rights, and national security. And the complexity of data makes it difficult to come up with proper policy responses. So let's turn to the next slide. It's very important that we start looking at how public policies can help ensure that data and data flows generate the results that we want at the world level. We need to look at ways of dealing with this so that we don't generate more inequalities, more divides in the world. But we need to do this also in a way that involves all parts of the world. That's why we are very much calling for a global approach to this, which is currently not really in existence. Next slide, please. The current framework or the current landscape for data governance is highly fragmented in the world. If you look at the three big players, the US, the European Union, and China, the approach taken to regulate data and data flows vary a lot. So the US, somewhat simplistic, you could say that they rely on control of data by the private sector. The European Union stressed the importance of individuals being in control of their data. And in China, you have a strong emphasis on control of data by the government. But all these three approaches or realms are trying to get traction also beyond their own territories. This fragmentation in the approach to data governance and other examples around the world, from Russia, from India, from parts of Africa and so on, lead to the risk of fragmentation of the entire digital space and also of the very functioning of the internet. And this is very dangerous in terms of promoting the development gains from the data-driven economy. Next slide, please. It's against this background that we think that we need to look for a more balanced global approach to data governance that works for the people and the planet. We need to look for ways of dealing with data that are multi-stakeholder, involving all the various private sector, government, civil society, and so on. It has to be multilateral. It needs to involve the participation of all member states of the world, not just the big powers. It needs to be multidisciplinary. We cannot just discuss this in the context of a trade issue or a privacy issue or a national security issue. We need to bring all those dimensions into the same discussion. And there is a long list of things that need to be addressed. Simply agreeing on what do we mean by data? What kind of different data are there? And how do we make sure that national regulations are talking about the same things so that there is interoperability between the data regimes of different parts of the world? Ultimately, we think that the goal should be to have a global approach to data governance that enables data to flow across borders as freely as necessary and as possible, while at the same time making it possible for governments to address various development objectives. This is not going to be easy in no way, but we need to start now. This is going to be one of the most important development challenges that the world is facing as we move forward. Next slide, please. And a final comment here is that while we are trying to figure out how best to do this at the global level, we also need to recognize again that the digital readiness of countries varies so much And in order for the poorer countries of the world to be able to harness the opportunities from data and to deal with the challenges of digital disruption that the previous speaker was referring to, we're going to need, among the richer countries of the world, to extend more support to the developing countries. The digital economy is moving very fast. It's evolving in new ways, and it's having an impact on virtually every global value chain and in every sector. So from that perspective, it's very important to ensure that not a large number of countries and people and businesses in the developing world are left behind as we move forward into the future. I would like to thank you again for this opportunity to address you today. My last slide will show you a link in case you're interested in reading more about the report, and you can download it free of charge. Thank you so much for your attention.